as I sit here and I'm working on my album, and I just so happen to be in the presence of my Jewish and Palestinian best friend and my Jewish engineer, I am being asked and called to clarify and make a statement yet again for the millionth time that I am not anti-Semitic nor anti-Jew. I am anti-genocide. I am anti the actions of the Israeli government. I am anti an extermination of an entire people. I'm anti the bombing of innocent children, men, women. That's what I'm anti. In fact, the very first live that I did in the beginning of this genocide was with a really beautiful Jewish organization called Jewish Voices for Peace. And I still continue to learn from and work alongside really impactful Jewish organizers against this genocide.
You just heard from Grammy-nominated R&B singer Kehlani, who felt compelled to respond to bullshit allegations of anti-Semitism once again after another one of her concerts was canceled because she chose to criticize Israel's genocide in Gaza. Now, we're going to talk about the disingenuous attacks on her in a moment, but first, I want to show you why she felt so compelled to speak out. Palestinian journalist Wissam Abu Mark of The Intercept writes, since Israel shattered the ceasefire on March 18th and sealed its blockade, 2.1 million Palestinians in Gaza have been cut off from essential food and aid, as the World Food Program and UNRWA have recently announced that their stocks of flour and food are depleted. The risk of widespread starvation grows with each passing day. A study conducted in late December of 2024 found that the average person in Gaza has lost around 18 kilograms, which is about 39 pounds, by the way, due to severe food insecurity during the war. The situation has only worsened since. The Israeli blockade that began on March 2nd has driven food prices beyond reach. My father told me last week, who lives in Gaza, that a 25 kilogram bag of flour now costs around $200. This week, the price has climbed to $470. Now, the flour that is available is often infested with bugs. Most bakeries have been shut down because they don't have what they need to produce even the bare minimum for the population. And Palestinians in Gaza are now literally in the process of starving to death as we speak. Journalist Alan McLeod shared this photograph of an emaciated Palestinian girl looking at a picture of herself before the blockade, and as you can see, she looks very, very different. And to be clear, Israel isn't just blocking food to Palestinians in Gaza. They're also blocking medical equipment as well and not allowing a lot of doctors to get in. And Sandra Adler-Killen, a pediatric nurse, just returned from Gaza, and she described what she saw on Democracy Now! And the word nightmarish doesn't even begin to describe the conditions.
We have this horrific trifecta of starvation, of lack of medicine and supplies, and bombings that are dramatically impacting the lives of new mothers and newborns. We see an incredible increase in malnutrition levels. I was embedded at Al-Aqsa and Nasser hospitals, and walking down the halls, I was living there during the time that I was there, and seeing the gaunt faces of people, whether they were celebrating the birth of their new babies, new life, whether, the family members that were there, they had nothing to share, nothing to celebrate. And yet here they were wanting to rejoice in this new life and not knowing what will happen in the future. So many children, when I was there the first time a year ago, I never, ever imagined a year later, not only after seeing the horrors that I saw a year ago, and thinking, well, there's going to be a ceasefire, things will end, things will get better. This can't go on. The world will not let this go on. But yet this annihilation is not only continuing, but the levels that I saw with my own eyes, it's just, there are no more words to use. Unbearable, horrific, indescribable, people can't obtain any kind of care because, number one, it's not safe to travel to the hospital. There's no ability for individuals to get prenatal care if it's too dangerous to travel. They have no money, no access to get there. Babies are being born in tents, first-time mothers with nobody around to help. And these babies are dying of starvation. Babies being brought into the hospital that I witnessed that were not survivable because of all of the blockades, because of the impacts of the bombings and the drone attacks and the inaccessibility. And then you have these incredible high levels of anemia, birth defects. I mean, I can go on and on. Increase in amount of premature babies that I saw. So many premature babies not surviving. No room in the neonatal intensive care in one of the largest functioning hospitals now in Gaza.
This is being done with the full support of the United States government. The Trump administration is supporting this genocide both politically and materially. Per the State Department's website, Secretary Rubio boasts about how the Trump administration has already sent Israel $12 billion more. And Barak Ravid of Axios reports Trump is not currently playing an active role in efforts to reach a ceasefire and has effectively given Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a green light to do as he sees fit, Israeli officials say. And if you're wondering what Israel's plans are, well, it's to permanently reoccupy Gaza and flatten all of Gaza, which would be a boon to Trump's businesses since he's already talked about plans to build resorts there. So we're essentially witnessing a modern-day Holocaust in 4K, and most of our politicians in both parties aren't just privately condoning and supporting this. They are openly, proudly, and enthusiastically supporting this with their full chests. And worse, they're smearing and punishing anyone who has the moral fortitude to denounce what will inevitably be regarded as one of the worst atrocities in human history. Now, to get back to Kehlani, she's been outspoken about this genocide from the beginning, and even though it's now directly affecting her career, she hasn't stopped speaking out, which says a lot about her character. Now, it's easier for people to just stay silent for self-serving reasons. This is why a lot of people don't speak out, because even if you know it's wrong to be quiet, I mean, we've seen what's happened to people who spoke out in favor of Palestine. But regardless, Kehlani has chosen to condemn this genocide repeatedly. And in addition to that, she's pressured other celebrities to be brave and do more than the bare minimum. For example, she talked about how it's not enough to wear ceasefire pins at award shows, which is what celebrities were doing to show support for a ceasefire. And she's right. What she's doing is commendable. What's happening is a genocide. And if Palestinians aren't being murdered by bombs, they're being murdered by starvation. So if you can't fix your lips to explicitly condemn what your tax dollars are funding, I think you're a coward. I think that Kehlani is right to call out other celebrities who are standing idly by and saying shit as an entire group of people is being wiped off the fucking map. So I agree with Kehlani. Now, back in April, her concert at Cornell University was canceled because of pro-Palestinian comments that she made. And in an Instagram story, she shared an image that said, "Long live the Intifada," which they called anti-Semitic, as this Guardian article reports. Now, the word Intifada just means revolution. The first Intifada was mostly peaceful, whereas the second one was violent. And if you don't think a revolution is necessary to end the suffering here, then I don't know what to tell you, but let's just cut the horseshit for a second. This is a distraction. The tone policing of the language of people condemning a genocide is used as a tool to distract us from talking about the real issue at hand, which is the genocide. And the issue isn't how she's condemning the genocide and what words she's using or phrases she's using. The issue is that she's condemning it at all. See, Zionists have even called Free Palestine anti-Semitic because they're not able to defend Israel's actions on the merits, so they engage in the neocon equivalent of woke scolding to make it seem like the people who are actually condemning the genocide are the real bad guys. It's a way for them to shift moral culpability away from Israel, and it's cynical, and they know what they're doing, and I think that most people are done playing this game. I, for one, am done playing this fucking game. But Kehlani's Cornell concert wasn't the only event canceled, because Kehlani is a member of the LGBTQ community who was scheduled to perform at Summer Stage in Central Park on June 26 for Pride, until, of course, Congressman Ritchie Torres, an AIPAC-funded genocide-supporting piece of shit, spoke to all of the managers he could speak to get the event canceled. This includes the City Parks Foundation, corporate sponsors like Capital One, and even Even New York City's corrupt mayor Eric Adams, who initially claimed that he didn't have the authority to get the event canceled, but he eventually succumbed to the pressure and threatened to revoke the license of the concert organizers if they didn't shut down the event. But of course, it wasn't because of Kehlani's speech, because that violated the First Amendment. It was because of supposed safety concerns about the concert, wink wink. And this isn't unique to the United States, by the way. The Irish rap group Kneecap is reportedly being investigated by the UK counter-terror police after they displayed messages of support for Palestine at their Coachella performance. And we've entered a new era of McCarthyism where any instance of resistance to the genocidal Israeli regime is met with fierce condemnation at best and legal punishment at worst. I mean, around 37 or so states have anti-BDS laws on the books, even though they brazenly violate the First Amendment. If you don't know what that means, it means that you're not able to get a job with the state or a contract if you don't sign a pledge to not boycott Israel. You can boycott America, but you can't boycott a foreign government based on laws that are on the books in 37 states. On top of that, we've talked on this show about Mahmoud Khalil, as well as Rumaisa Ozturk and Masa Madawi, and how they were detained by the Trump administration for pro-Palestinian speech. And the Trump administration is putting even more pressure on college campuses to crack down harder on pro-Palestinian activism because they know that the message of these students is too powerful to dispute. So being as ruthless as possible is their way of shutting people up about the genocide that they're complicit with. And they believe that if they're as harsh as possible in cracking down on these protesters, send in police to crack skulls, deny student protesters habeas corpus and due process, that ruthlessness is going to deter others from speaking out. But their efforts have failed, thankfully. And I say this because brave students at Columbia are still protesting. In fact, recently they chose to occupy their library despite knowing that they could lose everything because of it, including their freedom. As Common Dreams reports, the Trump administration is already in the process of reviewing the visas of any international students associated with that protest in order to send a message to anyone else thinking about joining a protest to condemn genocide. And we already talked about what they're protesting, which is something politicians and Zionists try to avoid like the plague, but just listen to the Orwellian propaganda from Fox News about these protests. I mean, it borders on parody.
Wow, they've got a beat going, but there's a lot of hate in that room right now. They hate Jewish Americans and the state of Israel, the Jewish state of Israel. A lot of hate on that campus. Some 100 masked anti-Israel protesters stormed Columbia University's campus in the first major protest since last spring. So we've seen this mounting. It's getting bigger now. This is one of the largest we've seen. Those protesters, this is not protected speech. This is not civil disobedience. This is hands-on violence.
Civil disobedience is violence, according to Snowflake Harris Faulkner. But starving children, bombing refugee camps and schools and hospitals and residential buildings and aid convoys, that's not violence. See, engaging in civil disobedience, that's the real violence that we should be concerned with. Astounding. Astounding. And she called them Jew haters while conveniently avoiding the fact that most of these campus protests have been led by Jewish organizers who don't appreciate the weaponization of their identities to support one of the greatest atrocities to ever have been committed. But the silver lining is that the people running cover for Israel's crimes against humanity are losing despite endless propaganda and McCarthyism and cynical accusations of anti-Semitism. And I say this because less than half of Americans are now sympathetic towards Israel. That number has flipped. And a Pew Research survey from March found that negative views towards Israel have risen sharply since 2022 across the ideological spectrum, and 50% of Republicans ages 18 to 49 now view Israel unfavorably, and the overwhelming majority of Democratic voters of all ages have a negative view of Israel. I wonder why. And the reason why I think the tide is turning is because some things are too obvious to obfuscate with propaganda, right? People aren't going to reject what they're seeing with their own two eyes if it's so radicalizing. They're not going to be convinced that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic when they can see what Israel is doing. They see through the bullshit. If you see a photograph of a child who's emaciated, laying in a hospital bed, dying, that is going to be what motivates you if you're a good person. That is going to convince you to speak up more than any bullshit allegations of anti-Semitism will motivate you to remain quiet, right? The people who are supporting this, the politicians in particular, in both parties, by the way, who are enthusiastically lending their support to this genocide, both materially and politically, like Ritchie Torres, Eric Adams, Donald Trump, Mike Lawler, Marco Rubio, and others, they are all going to be likened to Nazis in the not-so-distant future. Mark my words. That is inevitable. And no matter how much they intimidate and smear and try to cancel the people who refuse to stay silent, that is going to be how the world views these ghouls who are supporting this. So shout out to Kehlani for speaking truth to power in spite of the consequences. You know, even though it's very depressing and demoralizing to see the crackdown on anti-genocide speech in a country that's supposed to have a First Amendment that prevents all of that, you know, the fact that they're working this hard to shut us up is a sign that they're losing and we're winning. And I think the writing is already on the wall and they know that. But never, ever let the people who defended this forget about their role in history. They should never be able to live it down, and it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that that shame follows them around for the rest of their sad, pathetic lives.